Have you ever been told that all exercise is good for your heart? That the more you sweat, the healthier you become? Unfortunately, that's not the full picture. In today's video, we're going to uncover 5 common exercise mistakes that aren't just ineffective, they're slowly damaging your heart. And no, this isn't about avoiding movement. This is about working smarter, not harder. Because when it comes to cardiovascular health, overtraining, improper techniques, and hormonal stress can sabotage the very organ you're trying to protect. Chronic high-intensity cardio, though often praised for its fat burning and endurance benefits, can be a hidden saboteur of long-term health when done excessively. At the surface, it seems like a disciplined, healthy choice, pushing yourself through long runs, extended cycling sessions, or daily boot camp workouts. But beneath the surface, the physiological toll begins to mount, especially in the form of elevated cortisol and systemic inflammation. These internal stressors quietly erode the benefits and can actually damage the very systems you're trying to improve, especially your heart and metabolism. Cortisol is the body's primary stress hormone released by the adrenal glands in response to perceived danger, whether physical or emotional. Intense exercise, particularly when prolonged and frequent, is a physical stressor that sends a clear signal to the body: we're under threat. In acute doses, this is beneficial. A brief spike in cortisol helps mobilize energy, increase alertness, and enhance muscle function. But when cortisol is elevated chronically due to repeated high-intensity training without adequate recovery, the stress becomes maladaptive. The body doesn't distinguish between running from a predator or hammering out 45 minutes of burpees. In both cases, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal HPA axis is activated. Repeated stimulation of this axis leads to persistently high cortisol levels, which can begin to interfere with sleep, suppress thyroid function, elevate blood sugar, and disrupt hormone balance. Over time, this results in fatigue, mood instability, stubborn fat storage, particularly around the abdomen, and decreased immune resilience. Beyond the hormonal effects, there's also the issue of inflammation. Exercise in moderation produces beneficial acute inflammation that signals repair and adaptation. However, chronic high-intensity cardio without rest prevents this repair from completing and drives low-grade inflammation throughout the body. Inflammation is the immune system's way of cleaning up damage. But when the damage never stops, the cleanup crew becomes destructive. This creates oxidative stress, damages cells, and ages tissues prematurely. One of the most vulnerable systems to this pattern of stress and inflammation is the cardiovascular system. The heart is a muscle, and like all muscles, it responds to the stimulus it receives. When exposed to intense, relentless effort, it tries to adapt by increasing in size and efficiency, but without sufficient rest, the heart can become hypertrophied or structurally altered in a way that leads to stiffness, arrhythmias, or dysfunction. Some studies on endurance athletes show increased rates of atrial fibrillation and coronary calcification, even when these individuals appear lean and fit on the outside. Chronic cardio also drives up catecholamines like adrenaline and noradrenaline. These compounds increase heart rate, constrict blood vessels, and raise blood pressure. Again, useful in the short term, but damaging when sustained. When these stress responses are repeated day after day without balancing parasympathetic recovery, the body stays in a fight or flight state. This leads to elevated resting heart rate, poor heart rate variability, a marker of autonomic balance, and eventually burnout. Another overlooked aspect of prolonged high-intensity cardio is its impact on muscle tissue and metabolism. Elevated cortisol levels are catabolic. They break down tissue. This includes the breakdown of muscle, which is counterproductive for those seeking fat loss or metabolic health. Muscle mass is crucial for insulin sensitivity, strength, and long-term vitality. Chronic cardio can reduce muscle mass over time, if not counterbalance with resistance training and adequate protein intake. Nutrient depletion is also a risk with prolonged repetitive cardio. Essential minerals like magnesium, potassium, sodium, and calcium are lost in sweat and not always replenished. These minerals are vital for nerve conduction, heart rhythm, and muscle contraction. When deficiencies occur, they can contribute to cramps, fatigue, irregular heartbeat, and even more systemic inflammation. There's also a psychological component to consider. The fitness culture often glorifies pushing harder, going longer, and outlasting discomfort. This no pain, no gain mentality can drive people to ignore the early signs of hormonal imbalance, such as poor sleep, irritability, cravings, or chronic fatigue. Eventually, the body forces a pause in the form of burnout, injury, or illness. Recovery becomes longer, energy fades lower, and motivation fades. While cardio should not be demonized, it does play an important role in heart health, endurance, and mood. The key lies in moderation and smart programming. High-intensity cardio should be treated like a potent tool, not a daily prescription. Short bursts with ample recovery coupled with strength training and lower intensity movement like walking or stretching can provide all the benefits without the long-term cost. Fitness is not about pushing harder at all costs. It's about creating balance, listening to your body's signals, and building resilience from the inside out. Endurance training is often praised for its cardiovascular benefits, improved stamina, and mental toughness. However, what is rarely discussed are the hidden physiological consequences when this type of exercise is performed excessively or without proper recovery. Among the most concerning effects is the phenomenon of heart remodeling and atrial stretching, a condition in which the heart's structure changes in response to long-term stress, leading to functional disturbances that can quietly compromise health over time. The human heart is remarkably adaptive. Like any muscle, it responds to the demands placed upon it. When you engage in frequent, prolonged endurance exercise, such as marathon running, long-distance cycling, or hours of high-intensity interval training, the heart has to work harder to pump oxygenated blood to muscles for extended periods. This increased workload causes the cardiac chambers, particularly the left and right atrial ventricles, to enlarge and the heart walls to thicken. This is the body's attempt to become more efficient at pumping blood under continuous strain. In controlled, moderate doses, this adaptation can be beneficial, but when training becomes excessive, this natural adaptation can turn pathological. One of the earliest signs of problematic heart remodeling is atrial stretching. The atria are the upper chambers of the heart that receive blood returning from the body and lungs. With chronic high-volume endurance training, these chambers can become dilated from the repeated pressure surges and volume overload. This stretching can disrupt the electrical conduction system within the heart, which governs rhythm and coordination of the heartbeat. The result is an increased risk for atrial fibrillation, a condition where the atria beat irregularly and often too quickly, impairing effective blood flow and increasing stroke risk. Heart remodeling also affects the ventricles, particularly the left ventricle, which is responsible for pumping blood to the entire body. With repeated endurance exertion, the ventricle can enlarge and its walls may become either too thick or overly elastic, reducing the heart's efficiency. In some cases, fibrotic tissue begins to form within the heart muscle. This scarring reduces flexibility and impairs electrical signaling, further increasing the likelihood of arrhythmias and other cardiac complications. Another lesser-known consequence of this process is an increase in biomarkers associated with heart damage. Studies have found that endurance athletes, especially those who train at high volumes for years, often show elevated levels of cardiac troponins immediately after prolonged exercise. These proteins are usually only present in the bloodstream after heart injury. While some transient elevation is expected, persistently high levels can indicate that the heart muscle is experiencing chronic microtrauma. This remodeling and inflammation doesn't occur in isolation. It's often accompanied by increased oxidative stress, an imbalance between free radicals and antioxidants, which further damages cardiac tissues and accelerates aging. In the long run, the body's compensatory mechanisms can no longer keep up, and what started as a healthy habit can contribute to heart dysfunction. It's also important to understand that these risks are more pronounced in individuals who train at high intensity without proper recovery, nutrition, or awareness of the body's signals. Many endurance athletes develop what is called athlete's heart, which is a non-pathological enlargement of the heart due to consistent training. However, without proper balance, this state can transition into pathological heart remodeling. Dehydration, electrolyte imbalances, and chronic elevated cortisol levels often go hand in hand with excessive endurance training, compounding the heart's burden. Sodium, magnesium, and potassium play vital roles in nerve conduction and heart rhythm. Their depletion through excessive sweating and inadequate dietary replenishment can set the stage for arrhythmias and further cardiac stress. Sleep deprivation, often overlooked, is another factor that exacerbates the effects of endurance training. Sleep is the window during which the heart and body recover from physical stress. Without enough quality sleep, inflammation builds, hormones become dysregulated, and the likelihood of structural heart changes increases. Over time, this chronic wear and tear on the heart results in a decreased ability to handle physical stress and increases the risk of sudden cardiac events. Even in individuals who appear lean and fit, many people associate fitness solely with outward appearance or endurance capability, but true health goes deeper. An overworked heart may perform well in the short term, but it may be hiding stress fractures in the form of silent remodeling. The key lies in listening to the body, incorporating adequate rest, focusing on nutrient-rich foods, and limiting overtraining. Balance rather than excess should be the guiding principle of cardiovascular health. Pushing the body beyond its limits without respecting its needs for recovery creates a paradox, trying to achieve optimal health through a practice that may slowly be undermining it. Understanding how endurance training affects the heart's structure is crucial for designing a fitness lifestyle that promotes longevity, resilience, and internal balance rather than breakdown. When it comes to weightlifting, most people focus intensely on sets, reps, and the amount of weight they can push or pull. Yet, one of the most overlooked aspects of resistance training is the way you breathe. Incorrect breathing patterns, particularly during heavy lifting, can significantly elevate blood pressure, sometimes to dangerously high levels, and compromise your cardiovascular health in ways that aren't immediately obvious. The body's natural response during intense muscular exertion is often to hold the breath. This instinctive pattern is known as the Valsalva maneuver. It involves forcefully exhaling against a closed airway, which temporarily stabilizes the torso and spine to help lift heavy loads. While it may improve performance momentarily, doing this repeatedly without awareness or technique control creates a rapid spike in both systolic and diastolic blood pressure. In fact, during heavy lifts like squats or deadlifts, blood pressure can soar beyond 300/200 mmHg for a few seconds, well above what is considered safe. The danger here is not just the transient spike, but the stress it places on the heart and blood vessels. When the blood pressure climbs that high, the walls of the arteries experience acute strain. Over time, repeated exposure to these surges can lead to micro damage in the vascular lining, encouraging the formation of plaques and stiffening of the arteries, a precursor to long-term hypertension. Additionally, if someone already has undiagnosed high blood pressure, this type of breathing can push them into hypertensive crisis territory without warning. Another hidden effect of incorrect breathing is the reduction of venous return, the amount of blood flowing back to the heart. During the Valsalva maneuver, the increased pressure in the chest cavity restricts the return of blood to the heart, momentarily decreasing cardiac output. This can cause dizziness, blackouts, or lightheadedness during or immediately after a lift. It also increases the risk of arrhythmias, especially in individuals with existing heart rhythm imbalances or those unaware of underlying cardiovascular disease. Furthermore, sustained incorrect breathing doesn't just affect the cardiovascular system, it also negatively impacts intra-abdominal pressure regulation. Without the right kind of breathing, your core becomes unstable and you're more prone to hernias or spinal injuries due to the lack of internal support. Proper breathing not only protects your heart, it also protects your structure. Now, correct breathing in weightlifting isn't just about inhaling and exhaling randomly. It's about timing your breath with movement. The general rule is to inhale during the eccentric phase, the lowering or easier part of the lift, and exhale during the concentric phase, the lifting or harder part of the movement. For example, during a bench press, you would inhale as you lower the bar to your chest and exhale as you press it up. This rhythm ensures a steady flow of oxygen, regulates internal pressure, and helps prevent dramatic blood pressure spikes. And a particularly useful technique is diaphragmatic breathing, which engages the full range of the lungs and taps into the parasympathetic nervous system. This type of breathing not only enhances oxygen delivery to the muscles, but also calms the body's stress response. When the diaphragm is engaged, the breathing is deeper and more controlled, and the core gets added stability through natural intra-abdominal pressure, not forced bracing. So it's important to remember that breathing habits don't change overnight. Many people have been lifting with incorrect patterns for years, so retraining the breath requires conscious repetition. A good starting point is practicing with lighter weights until the proper breathing becomes second nature. From there, gradually increase intensity while maintaining form and breath coordination. Breathing is also closely tied to mindset and focus. A panicked or overly strained breath can signal the nervous system to release stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, further elevating blood pressure and creating an inflammatory state. Over time, this contributes to fatigue, poor recovery, and even central nervous system burnout. Controlled breathing, on the other hand, supports recovery, sharpens mental clarity, and helps regulate emotional state, key factors in maintaining long-term fitness. Another critical consideration is hydration and electrolyte balance. When you're dehydrated or low in minerals like magnesium and potassium, your blood vessels are more constricted and your heart has to work harder to maintain circulation. Combine that with incorrect breathing during heavy lifting, and you've created a recipe for cardiovascular overload. Finally, it's essential to evaluate the cumulative effect of your training environment. If you're training in a hot or poorly ventilated space, or you're under high stress or sleep deprived, your cardiovascular system is already under pressure. Incorrect breathing simply magnifies the risk. Taking control of your breath gives you the ability to regulate blood pressure naturally, maximize performance, and protect the heart. High-intensity interval training, or HIIT, has gained massive popularity over the past decade as a time-efficient and effective way to burn fat, improve cardiovascular endurance, and build metabolic resilience. But there's a dark side to this trend that most people overlook. When HIIT is done without proper recovery, it can actually damage the very systems it was meant to improve, especially your mitochondria and heart rhythm. Mitochondria are the powerhouses of your cells. They're responsible for producing ATP, the energy currency your body needs to function. HIIT stimulates mitochondrial biogenesis, which means your body builds more of these power generators to meet increased energy demands. That sounds like a good thing, and it is when done right. However, without sufficient rest and nutrient replenishment, this demand can overwhelm your existing mitochondria. Instead of thriving, they begin to malfunction under the strain of constant high-intensity stress. Damaged mitochondria produce excess free radicals, which leads to oxidative stress and cellular inflammation. This is the very condition that accelerates aging, impairs recovery, and sets the stage for chronic disease. Additionally, high-intensity exercise triggers the sympathetic nervous system, which is your body's fight-or-flight response. That system, while necessary in short bursts, becomes destructive if it's activated too frequently. HIIT workouts flood the body with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones are designed to be acute. They help you handle danger and stress in short windows, but repeated HIIT sessions without sufficient recovery push these hormones into chronic elevation. Chronically elevated cortisol impairs your immune function, breaks down muscle tissue, increases insulin resistance, and suppresses thyroid function. Essentially, your body begins to break itself down rather than build itself up. The heart, being a muscle, responds directly to the demands you place on it. With HIIT, you're pushing your heart rate to near maximal levels. Done occasionally, this strengthens cardiac output and aerobic capacity. But if you do this frequently without recovery, you force the heart into constant high-pressure activity, and that changes its structure and rhythm. Studies have shown that excessive endurance or high-intensity training without recovery leads to atrial enlargement, stretching of the upper chambers of the heart. This makes the heart more susceptible to arrhythmias, particularly atrial fibrillation, which can increase your risk for stroke and heart failure. Heart rate variability, HRV, a marker of nervous system balance and cardiovascular resilience, often declines in individuals who overtrain with HIIT. Low HRV indicates your body is stuck in sympathetic overdrive and lacks the ability to bounce back. It's a signal that your parasympathetic or rest and digest system is suppressed. When this balance is off, the electrical system that governs your heart rhythm becomes unstable. That's when you start seeing irregular beats, palpitations, and in some cases, serious arrhythmias that require medical intervention. Overtraining also has a compounding effect on mitochondrial health. When the body doesn't have time to repair, the mitochondrial DNA gets damaged. Unlike nuclear DNA, mitochondrial DNA doesn't have robust repair mechanisms. That means once it's damaged, the energy output of those mitochondria drops significantly. You'll begin to feel chronic fatigue, muscle weakness, and even brain fog. All signs that your energy systems are in decline. This makes recovery even harder, and a vicious cycle begins. One of the most overlooked aspects of HIIT programming is the recovery ratio. Most people focus on how intense the sprints are, how many rounds they do, or how short the rest periods can be. But proper HIIT involves more rest than exertion when it comes to nervous system and mitochondrial protection. If your sprint lasts 30 seconds, you need at least 90 seconds or more of complete recovery to allow your body to return to a baseline before the next round. Without this, you don't allow your heart rate or metabolic system to recover, and each round becomes more damaging than beneficial. Another key component is nutrition. Mitochondria need nutrients like CoQ10, magnesium, B vitamins, and healthy fats to function properly. When you do intense exercise frequently without replenishing these nutrients, you deplete your reserves. Most people aren't getting enough of these from their diet to begin with, especially those on processed or low-fat diets. That depletion compromises mitochondrial resilience, and over time, you begin to feel more drained from your workouts rather than energized. Sleep is another pillar that can't be ignored. Mitochondrial repair and cardiac recovery happen mostly during deep sleep. If your nervous system is too jacked up from late-night HIIT sessions, cortisol will suppress melatonin production, disrupt your circadian rhythm, and impair your deep sleep. That means your body enters the next workout in an already compromised state, and the damage continues to accumulate. Lastly, proper HIIT training should be periodized. That means you cycle through phases of intensity and recovery throughout the week and month. You can't just go hard every day and expect your body to adapt. Instead, build in low-intensity days, mobility work, deep breathing, or even complete rest days. Your mitochondria and your heart will thank you. Overtraining with stimulants is one of the most dangerously overlooked practices in fitness and athletic culture today. Many people unknowingly push their bodies to the brink of collapse by combining intense workouts with caffeine, pre-workouts, energy drinks, or fat burners, all in an effort to boost performance, increase endurance, or burn more fat. But the temporary high they feel often hides a deeper issue. The body's natural fatigue response is being overridden, particularly in the cardiovascular system. When that internal warning signal is silenced by stimulants, heart fatigue can set in quietly, gradually, and often permanently. Stimulants like caffeine and other synthetic compounds found in energy supplements artificially increase the output of your central nervous system. They elevate heart rate, increase blood pressure, and trigger the release of adrenaline and cortisol. This puts your body in a temporary fight or flight state where performance might feel enhanced, but biological cost accumulates. When you pair this with high volume or high intensity training, your heart and nervous system are pushed far beyond their natural thresholds, and you may not even realize the damage being done because stimulants are masking the early warning signs of fatigue. Your body has built-in safety mechanisms to tell you when to stop. Fatigue, soreness, brain fog, and lower performance are all messages from your body signaling that it's time to rest, repair, and restore. When you ignore these signals through the use of stimulants, you're essentially turning off the alarm bells and continuing to train in a compromised state. Over time, this contributes to something called autonomic imbalance, where your sympathetic nervous system dominates and your parasympathetic system, the one responsible for rest and recovery, gets suppressed. This imbalance has direct implications on your heart. Chronic sympathetic overdrive leads to constant elevation in heart rate and blood pressure, which increases wear and tear on the cardiovascular system. The heart muscle itself begins to experience oxidative stress and inflammation. Unlike skeletal muscle, which is designed to handle a variety of stressors, the heart is more sensitive to long-term sympathetic dominance. You won't necessarily feel this immediately. There may be no pain, no discomfort, just a sense of energy, focus, or stamina from your favorite pre-workout. But behind that facade, the heart is working harder than it should, longer than it should, and without adequate repair. Another danger lies in the depletion of key nutrients. Stimulants and overtraining together deplete magnesium, potassium, B vitamins, and CoQ10, critical for both heart rhythm and mitochondrial function. These nutrients are required for proper muscle contraction and relaxation, electrical stability in the heart, and cellular energy production. As they decline, your heart becomes more vulnerable to arrhythmias, skipped beats, palpitations, and in extreme cases, even cardiac events. Many people attribute these symptoms to anxiety or external stress, but the truth is often rooted in how the body's internal systems have been compromised by excessive stimulant use combined with overtraining. There's also the issue of sleep, another area where stimulants wreak havoc. Caffeine has a half-life of about 5-7 hours, meaning if you take it in the afternoon or evening to power through a workout, it's likely still in your system when you try to sleep. Even if you fall asleep, the quality of your deep restorative sleep is diminished. And without quality sleep, your heart doesn't fully recover, your cortisol remains elevated, and your overall recovery slows down. The next day, you're tired again, so you reach for another stimulant to compensate. This forms a vicious cycle: under-recovered, overstimulated, and unknowingly overtrained. Many athletes and even average gym goers who rely on stimulants end up with chronically elevated resting heart rates, suppressed heart rate variability, HRV, and reduced exercise tolerance over time. This is the body adapting to stress, not by becoming stronger, but by protecting itself. It's a silent shutdown mechanism where your performance begins to plateau or even regress. And you may find yourself out of breath faster, needing more caffeine to feel energized, or noticing strange heart sensations during or after workouts. These are all signs that the body's resilience is waning under the constant barrage of artificial stimulation and physical stress. On top of this, stimulant-induced training often leads to poor movement mechanics and injury. When you're overstimulated, your perception of fatigue and pain is dulled, so you lift heavier than you should, run longer than you should, or push through improper form. This not only increases mechanical stress on joints and muscles, but adds additional strain on the cardiovascular system, trying to keep up with the demands you're placing on it. It's important to understand that stimulants have their place when used sparingly and strategically, but when they become a daily crutch to push through fatigue, you're no longer enhancing performance, you're bypassing your body's natural recovery cues. True heart health and athletic longevity come from respecting the body's cycles of exertion and rest. If you're constantly needing stimulants to perform, it's a sign your body is not recovered, your nervous system is overloaded, and your heart is silently taking the brunt of the abuse.